This is a briefing that will be done by our city auditor, Corey Stokes, and her staff. And so without further ado, I'll turn it over to Ms. Stokes.
All right. Can y'all see and hear me? No, not yet. Maybe yes. You can just hear me. Here we go. We'll try with C. Okay. Good morning, y'all. And the other thing that I'm not entirely sure, oh, there we go. Y'all are sharing it for me. Perfect. All right. So today I'm Corey Stokes. I'm the city auditor, and I am here to share information about our redistricting process and the responsibilities my office has for 2020. So next slide. So I know you as council members and many folks within the city know what redistricting is, but just for the public, redistricting, it's a voter design process where we redraw council districts, council district boundaries based on new census data. So that's the census data that's being collected now and available in early 2021. These boundaries shape how residents are represented for the next decade, because this only happens once every 10 years. We did first do this when the charter was changed by voters in 2012 to move to single member districts, and we're starting it again now. As I mentioned, the idea is that there will be a redistricting process in 2021 that affects 2022 elections. Next slide, please. So my office's job, as laid out in the charter, is to initiate and widely publicize a process for applicants for two bodies. So the first body is the applicant review panel. This panel is responsible for helping select commissioners, and I'll talk a little bit more about those guys in a minute. And then there's the Independent Citizen Redistricting Commission. This is the commission that draws the boundaries of Austin council districts. In both of these, there are various requirements. So for the panel, you have to be a CPA or certified public accountant. You have to have some audit experience, and there are some other requirements there. The panel is 3 members. And then for the commission itself, there are actually many requirements. Voting history is one of those, as well as there are several conflict of interest provisions to ensure independence, residency. You can't have been a city employee for, I think, 3 years. So there are various things designed to help ensure the independence of that commission. You and anyone can learn all about this and more on our website. I'll give you a preview of that in a minute, but there's a lot more information. It's it's redistrictatx.org. Hopefully I say it right. Next slide, please. So how the process works, as I mentioned, there's a panel, the 3 CPAs with audit experience do the initial work. They take however many applicants we have, and they narrow it down to the 60 most qualified applicants using various criteria. From those 60, we randomly select 8. My office randomly selects 8, and those are the first members of the Independent Citizen Redistricting Commission. Those 8 then select the remaining 6 members to create a diverse 14-member commission, and then the commissioners start their work reviewing census data and drawing council districts. Next slide, please. So some key dates here. The applications for the commission and the panel are open now. They opened last week, and we've actually already gotten quite a few. I think as of yesterday, we had 40 commission applications and 42 commission applications and 9 panel. I think that number has probably gone up by today. That application period is open, and our major outreach is happening between now and September. September 1st is when we close the panel applications, and September 30th for the commission. And then on October 1st, and almost all of these dates are very specifically spelled out in the charter. But on October 1st, we do the random selection for the panel. The panel does their work through January. And then one thing to point out specifically to this group, in the charter, there are specific provisions that allow each council member to strike one of the 60, one of the applicants in the qualified pool. So from the 60, each council member can strike one. Last time around, nobody exercised the strike, but I wanted to make sure y'all were aware of that provision. And then we randomly choose from the remaining applicants, whether that's 60 or 49 or something in between. We select 8 commissioners, and then as I mentioned, they choose 6 more, and then they go forth and do their work to basically have everything in line for an election in 2022. Next slide, please. I keep trying to change my own slides. It doesn't work, turns out. A big change in potential applicants between the last time we did this work and now. You can see here, we know Austin is growing very fast, but Austin's population has increased probably around 15% during this time frame. The reason why the eligible voters has increased so drastically, I think it's 345%, something along that, is because the switch from May to November local elections. So one of the requirements is that you've voted in 3 of the last 5 local elections. When those elections switch from May to November, the voter turnout increased significantly for local elections. So given the increase in potential applicants, we have expanded our outreach. We've also, So we expanded our outreach, both because of the increase in possible applicants, but also the current pandemic has really changed our planned approach and outreach. We have to meet the timelines in the charter related to the commission. And so we've really shifted our focus. At first, we were kind of pushing back our plans to maybe have in-person engagement later. And then we realized it didn't really make sense. And so we've shifted our focus to more virtual engagement. And we're also physical outreach, but that does not involve in-person meetings. So this includes billboards, TV and radio ads, social media, virtual meetings. The library has actually agreed to pass out information for us at their, I forgot what it's called, but where you can, your drive up library book getting. So there's basically, we're doing things differently, but we still hope to reach wide and diverse pool of candidates. And I'm hoping that by now some folks have seen or heard some of our advertising. It went live on June 1st, so hopefully people are seeing it. Next slide, please. Our next big engagement activity is a virtual town hall. We'll be having that on June 18th at 6 p.m. That's an opportunity for the community to learn about redistricting, ask questions, and we expect to have additional meetings throughout the campaign. We also will be reaching out to specific community groups, or specifically 2 community groups, and offering to meet with them virtually if they want more information. Next slide. So everything you need to know about redistricting is on our website at redistrictatx.org. I'm really proud of the work that's been done to get us to this website. And you can see here, we've been also interacting with the panelists and commissioners who served, I guess they're technically current, but who served on the prior commission. They've been really helpful in us collecting information for our campaign. So one more thing about the outreach, next slide. We are translating all redistricting information and applications into multiple languages. Right now we have Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese. We'll do other languages by request. And it's not just the information, but you can actually apply in another language. So that is all the information that I have. Go to the last slide. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
I have some questions, Mayor. I don't see him, so I'm going to ask my question.
Okay, sorry. Okay. Mayor Pro Tem, would you take the helm here for this one? No.
Sure.
Thank you.
Let me switch my screen so I can see everyone. The heat map, I'm trying to understand it. I understand it's saying the concentration of eligible, it says eligible voters, but do you mean eligible people to participate in the commission?
Yes, it says voters because one of the criteria is that you have to have voted in 3 of the last 5 elections. And so this is the data on those, how many people voted in 3 of the last 5 elections.
And it just shows the concentration, but still, it looks like throughout the city, there are people who have voted in the last 3 elections. So even in the yellow areas, there are people who have worked who have voted in the last 3 elections.
Absolutely.
Okay, just knowing where the concentration is. And then, if I remember correctly, there are limitations as far as and I'm sure you're pointing this out in the outreach, I just didn't see it in the PowerPoint, but like, I one of them was, if you serve on this commission, you cannot like run for city council for a certain number of years. And I just think it's important. Like one question I often get asked of people interested in serving on council is, I advise them serve on a commission, but this is one where if you serve on this, you cannot run for council for a certain number of years. Can you remind me what that time period is?
No. You have it exactly right. If you serve on the commission, you can't serve on council for 10 years. And there are some other things. Most of the things are restrictions for like when you apply, but that is definitely one that's in a restriction after you serve.
Okay.
And we have a FAQ, frequently asked questions document on the website that answers a lot of those questions about kind of what the restrictions might be should you decide to serve on this commission. And I believe that's also true for the panel.
Okay, I just wanted to say that that's probably one of the most important ones, especially there seems to be a lot of more interest in civic engagement, which is great. And I just I want people to know that would be a limitation to their running for council if they serve on the commission. And then lastly, if it's not part of the presentation, I think that the discussion about what redistricting is great, but the history of this movement I think would be really great, because when I often talk about, I feel like I'm talking about my little baby here, but it's not my baby, but because I think it's really, when I tell people about how we were at large council for such a long time and how that really in many ways prohibited, but made it very hard for minorities to be elected to the city council. I think that's a really important history that people need to know of, and how it was up for election 6 times, it failed 6 times, and it took us the 7th attempt to pass geographic representation. I think that'd just be an important little history lesson for folks too, if you wouldn't mind adding something to that effect in any kind of presentations. And thank you for me. Mayor, do you want?
Okay, I'm back. Thank you. Anybody else? Questions about this presentation? Yes, Councilmember Alter.
I'm sorry, I have share a printer with my rest of my house here, so I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Stokes, for that overview. Can you speak a little bit to how the census timing is going to overlap with the timing for redistricting, and how we're adapting and what limits our ability to adapt, if there are any limits, please?
So that certainly from our perspective, that's something that we've been talking about. And so if the census is delayed, do we delay redistricting efforts? In our conversations with the law department, and certainly our city attorney can speak to this as well, but in the conversations with the law department, basically we should still stick to the charter mandated process. It could mean that the commission has a delay, or the commission doesn't have all the data they need once they're formed. So it could push back the process for the Independent Citizen Redistricting Commission. It would not necessarily, or it does not change our timelines for recruiting that group.
So the charter determines the recruiting timeline, not the timeline for when it needs to be finished. So we have, the most important thing is for them to have the data when they're making their final decisions.
Absolutely. And so there could be, there may be some time where they're not actively doing their work with the census data if census data is delayed.
Yeah, but presumably there's also a lot of work to look at past history, as Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, of the system and the intentions and the work of the prior commission. That would come probably before you would get too deep into the current data anyway. Is that correct?
Absolutely. There's also the time to select the 8 commissioners, select the additional 6. And so there'll be time for that as well.
And I just wanted to also give you an opportunity to just daylight the changes that we needed to accept with respect to the audit plan due to the extra work with this as well as COVID for my colleagues. We discussed this in audit and finance, but I think it's important for everyone else to hear about it.
Sure. So redistricting has taken up a huge, huge piece of my staff's time. We have probably, I would say, half of our staff working on this. Not exclusively, but and then in addition, we've had some we currently have some vacancies, and so that's impacting our ability to complete work. So we've recommended taking a couple of things off of our audit plan, but we've also added a risk assessment, basically a way for us to be cognizant and paying attention to what's going on with the response to the coronavirus, and making sure that we can identify projects for the future, not necessarily to get in the way right this second, but a way for us to identify projects that might be more relevant than some of the work we had planned. The example I use is one of the audits we took off the plan relates to parking management. And right now, parking management looks really different than it did when that was a high risk that we put on our plan. Doesn't mean it won't come back as a high risk, but for now, that's the kind of shifts that we've made to accommodate this work on redistricting, as well as to complete the rest of the work on our slate.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Colleagues, anything else on this presentation? All right, thank you very much, Corey. Thank you.
Certainly.